Meeting is now live streaming. Okay.
Yeah, I saw it that time. You got me that time. It's funny how sometimes it'll tell me that it is and sometimes that it doesn't. That's why I get surprised
Maybe it's the user.
sometimes. It's the user, right? Users are losers. Remember that?
Yep.
All right, let's see. Um,
All right. So we are
anyway,
live.
okay. Okay. I just have to oh, that's it right there. There we go. I just gotta get my stuff in gear here, Mary. I'm ill
All right.
prepared, which is weird because you're actually on time.
Yeah.
You
Shockingly.
know?
Oh,
Yeah,
good morning, everybody. To the
there's
one
nobody.
person watching this.
That's probably me. There's nobody on. Generally, we have no listeners.
Listeners.
Yeah, that's all good. That's all
Yep.
good. Um, no, but it'd be good. It'd be nice to get out today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Big plans in Plymouth, Mary. Big
Mm-hmm.
plans in town today. We'll be definitely be taking advantage of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was glad we got back to the Western Theater and to doing a battle that the 160th anniversary has just passed
yeah, it's pretty
because
cool.
I feel like we've been kind of going all over the place with like, ones from 1862, 1863, and it's nice to kind of do one that is
Well,
the
that
one
well,
160th.
well,
Of
that's that.
morning.
Well, that's what happens though. Is you jump around, and that's okay,
Yeah,
right? Remember that song "Jump Around"? Who's saying that song?
love
Remember?
that song. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
That's
But that's what we do. Anyway, all right, okay.
Etzcorn says he's like, I may have a first for you guys. I'm running an excavator while watching. There was no OSHA in the 1860s.
Well, be safe at Scorn. Be safe. Running an excavator. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've never been
Morning.
on an excavator ever.
Ben's on here from Texas, and then Miranda's on here as well.
Oh, very cool. Very
Good
cool.
morning,
Oh,
Lisa.
oh, hey. No, but you're right. But it's good to get back to the Western theater because it's we're kind of spoiled here in the East because we're from here, and so people, as
Mhm.
you know, people think that everything centers around the East. Eastern bias. You hear that all the time. But it's nice to get in the West because that's where the rubber hits the road. We've said it a million times. That's where the real fighting is. And
Mhm.
when you look at some of the stories, and specifically with the Army of Tennessee and the Army of the Ohio, the Army of the Cumberland, the Army of the Tennessee, they talk a lot about that. And that was a big knock against Hood. It was he was kind of the pretty boy, the dandy from the East
Yep.
under the Army of Northern Virginia. He didn't know how to fight in the West, and that's how it came. And Longstreet caught a lot of that crap too when he came over in the summer of
Yep.
'63 after Gettysburg. So yeah, so that happens. It
Well,
happens.
the Eastern Theater is like a different beast when it comes to, I think, like I was saying to you yesterday, and I felt like I didn't know how to word this, but I got the feeling that the Western Theater was a little bit more, I don't want to say fun, but it was more relaxed because you can see the narrative in Howard's memoirs change from when he's in the Eastern Theater to when he's in the Western Theater. There's an and there's also a change in his, like a little bit of a change in his letters too. And I think it's because I think he was able to go out there and not worry about the politics as much. And that goes back to Sherman. Now, there are still politics going on, especially in Army of Tennessee, the Confederate Army, but you don't have it. It just seems different in the Eastern Theater. And I think it's because the proximity to Washington. And again, it goes back to the cast of characters. And Western Theater is definitely more a little bit quote unquote Wild West. They're further away. They're able to maybe get away with a little bit more than what they are in the East. And also the terrain, I think it factors into it too. You have like some battles that are pretty rough and all that. And like Peachtree Creek, the terrain there is very like hilly and it's just not great to fight a battle on.
No, and you're fighting in swamps, and William Bate
Yep.
found out the hard way about not paying attention where to ways as he's going through his beginning part of the battle. But yeah, but that's a big part of it. But I think people felt like they were when you're working in the East. I think you always feel like the boss is watching you, right? Whether
Yep.
you're a Confederate or whether a Union, because the capitals are right there, the politics are right there, the news is quicker. You've got the newspapers from Boston, Philly, New York, Richmond. They're all in that area.
Yep.
So I think when you go out west, you have a little bit of time to buffer a little bit. But I think a lot of it is just the different styles of fighting. I mean, the terrain was no picnic in the East either. I
Oh
mean,
no.
as much as see some of these battlefields now, Gettysburg and Antietam are two of the very few battlefields that has open ground. That
Yeah.
most of it was in the woods from both sides. But yeah, but you can definitely see a change in someone like Howard, for
Mhm.
example, who
Yep.
moves over to the West and he just becomes better. Although his not so good was a little overrated. In the East anyway, because he was better. He was
Yeah.
better than he gets credit for.
He
But
was
then,
coming there with a reputation, though, which Sherman definitely noted in a letter that he wrote Howard. He basically said, I know what has been said about you. I just want you to know basically I don't care. And it will be an honor to serve with you and have you in my army, basically, which was, I mean, Sherman's a lot of things, but he's very respectful towards Howard. Rob, morning MJ, morning Rob,
oh
morning
hey,
James, morning
no,
Ski. And just before we get too far into this, Barbara had a really great idea, and that was like, just take a minute and remember Pete Carmichael.
mm, yeah, that's a tough one right
Raise a
there.
toast to Pete, basically. So yeah, and I'm sure everybody on here knows Pete Carmichael passed away. I think it was last Sunday. Huge shock to the Civil War community, especially Gettysburg.
Yeah, and we got to know him pretty well. We did a really good episode with him. We chose not to repost the episode for a bunch of reasons. I just felt that it was,
Mhm.
I don't know, I didn't want to make it look like we were trying to grab listens on someone's death or anything. I felt we felt really weird about doing that, so we never
Yep.
did. But you can go find it if you want. But no, he was a good guy, very true gentleman, very friendly,
Hmm.
funny guy.
Yep.
Hella good hair, as Taylor Swift would say,
Oh, it's amazing
right?
hair, and he.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
that I was going to say that's why you always appreciate today. Tomorrow's promised to nobody, and
Yeah.
always take advantage of that. But he's a big loss, and so yeah, that hit us like a truck. We were sitting at the
Yeah.
beach when that news came down, and that was yeah. There's no words around it. So definitely appreciate what you got. Take advantage of life and enjoy it at the fullest, because you don't want to be sitting back wondering. And the worst word in
Yeah.
the English language is regret. So definitely take advantage. So do it. So appreciate someone like that. Appreciate all the good people in this field, because we're all kind of cut from the same cloth with this. And he's a much higher level than we will ever be. But he's somebody who, regardless of whether you were a PhD from Gettysburg College or you were some lowly podcaster, he treated
Hmm.
you the same. He treated you
Yep.
the same. And that's what made Pete great. So definitely appreciate that. So I'll toast him with my Sherman mug. So
Yes, and my
he's
Chickamauga mug, which it's so back in 2019, I visited Chickamauga for the second time, and I found Pete Carmichael's book there.
yeah.
War for the Common Soldier, and I'd been wanting to get it, and it just like it wasn't available because I was living in Canada at the time. Like for some reason, I couldn't get it shipped there. I was having trouble finding a copy of it, and there it was, and I bought it. And I sent him a picture, and I said, "Hey, just to let you know, this book is available at the visitor center." And he wrote me back, and he said thank you. And he also he's like, you should come and consider CWI sometime. He's like, we really need more Canadians interested in the Civil War. It's like, wow,
No,
it was such a nice message
no, it was
that,
great.
that he wrote, that he took
We
the time to do that.
we did that 100th episode thing in Gettysburg at Fourscore, and he showed up and he was there. We talked to him for a while, and he actually asked us to be on. I was like, oh yeah, cool.
He's
Geez,
like, if you
these
need
are
a guest, and we're like, yes. And Scott is on here, and he just said he watched episode 106 again, which was like that's the episode Pete was on. And he said it's one of the best. And that was one of my favorite episodes because Pete just like we talked about the Futch letters, which Futch was a guy who was killed Culp's Hill at the Battle of Gettysburg. And it was such a like and his brother, well, his Futch's brother was killed, and then Futch ends up getting executed. And it was such a sad story. But that's what Pete was about, was telling that side, like, the what the soldiers had to say and all that, which was really, really good.
no, there are a few people in the world that I think are universally loved and respected. He was certainly one of them.
Oh
So
yeah.
so definitely, if you guys do anything Civil War related, history, anything like that, always remember to carry on his legacy, because he's because that's really what our job is to do. So
Yeah.
anyway, so hopefully he's in a better place. That's a horrible story. But
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for bringing us down, Mary.
Yeah. I didn't bring you down.
I'm
That was a very
kidding.
positive,
God.
like, and as MJ says, that Pete never took himself too seriously, and he was never condescending to anybody at all, no matter who you were. And he knew about when we met him, he was so nice to us and we got to hang out for a little bit and take a picture with him. And that was something like I always remember. It was just how nice he was. And it was actually, wasn't it Gary Edelman who said you guys, Pete Carmichael's here, you should meet him?
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty cool. And he sent us
Yeah.
his book, and again, we were at Gettysburg a few weeks ago, and we were over at Barlow's Knoll, looking at all the dropped Cub Scout badges in the area
Yeah.
around there, and we overheard some students talking about, I've Dr. Carmichael and blah blah blah, and just hear them
Yeah.
talk about it. And whether you're a student or a professor or historian or everyone, he was just that guy. He was that guy. So he, like I said, if you do history, do it well because you're carrying his legacy. And he's
Yeah.
someone who I never heard him say a bad word about anybody. He was one of
Nope.
those dudes. So very good guy. So he was
No,
like that.
awesome
So
guy.
anyway, yeah.
But
And he loved the Western Theater,
actually,
Mary.
the other thing I want to mention was in the message he sent me, he told me Chickamauga was the first battlefield he ever visited when he was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
like, and it's one of it and Gettysburg and Monocacy are kind of, I go back and forth between those three, but I think Chickamauga is just and I mean, again, I am so Western theater. Now, admittedly, I'm getting back, obviously studying the Eastern theater more. I'm reading Fonz's Gettysburg Day One for the first time, which for anybody, whether you're into Gettysburg or not, read Fonz, Gettysburg Day One. It is such a good book.
Yeah, Fonz is really, really good. I mean, there's that obviously he's the big three with Fonz, Coddington, Sears, these ones. But what separates him, and you can, like we said before, you can always tell when someone hasn't read Fonz and says
Yeah.
they have. You
Yeah.
just, he just, he
Oh,
just
yeah.
it's one of those things, right? But he is very, very, very detailed. He gives by far. It's not in that book. It's actually in the third book.
Mhm.
He has the first day, the second day, and his third book is about Cobb's Hill.
Yeah.
He gives the best, and we've talked about Brinkerhoff Ridge a lot. We talked about the Low Dutch Road. We've talked about all that stuff. He gives the absolute best description of Dave Montgomery, Red DMG, Dave McMurtry, Greg. He talks about everything with that set up to the cavalry raids. And so read all his books. I mean, Coddington's good too. But Fonz is really, really, really detailed. And I can't say enough about those books. But there's a lot of good books still, Mary. But he's pretty tight. He isn't too opinionated. He's kind of funny in a way.
Oh, he's like the when he was talking about AP Hill, how he went to New York City to sow his wild oats, and his crop was gonorrhea.
And I actually stumbled upon his gravesite at Evergreen. When you were sleeping late one day, and I think that was the day after us and MJ went to the mine that day. So I went to go see her presentation by myself. But I think I ran into his gravestone that day. But yeah, but anyway, but he's good. There's a lot of good stuff to read. There's no question.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good stuff to read about this stuff. But you're right, though. The Western Theater does not get the publicity here as it does, obviously, in the Atlanta area. This episode we did on Peachtree Creek, we didn't get a chance to visit that battlefield, but there's not much left of it.
No, it's not like Ezra Church. The closer you get to Atlanta, now keep in mind, like Atlanta was a lot smaller back then, and now the area where these battles like Ezra and Peachtree were fought, that the anniversary of the 160th of Ezra Church is, I think, tomorrow. I think.
What's today's date? What's today's date?
The 27th.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all coming down because then it leads into Ezra. It obviously leads into Jonesboro, leads into Decatur. And we just dropped the episode about a half an hour ago, so probably people haven't listened to it yet if you do. But the Battle of Peachtree Creek is one that I think a lot of people don't really recognize because it's one of those obscure battles that gets kind of all thrown into the Atlantic campaign. But it's really the beginning of the end for the Southern Confederacy in Georgia. And it's a lot of times you say stuff, it's hyperbole, right? You say, well, this, but this really was. When you look at the situation where, okay, Johnson's fallen back 100 miles from Chattanooga to Atlanta. And every single time he goes to fight, Sherman flanks him around the Confederate left. And he falls back and he falls back and he falls back. And he's just rope-a-doping the whole way. He gets to the river there, and he ends up basically the Chattahoochee.
Yeah.
And instead of going around his left, this time he goes around his right, sends John Schofield's Army of the Ohio north around over the river, around north of Atlanta, east towards Decatur.
Yep.
And then Johnson is like, shit, because he built that huge defense on
Yeah.
with all the Shupa days, right? With 90 plus guns, 10 miles of defenses,
Mhm.
breastworks, the last line of defense. And Sherman goes around like it's nothing. And so Johnson's going to get replaced finally, and Davis is going to think about it for a few days. He finally replaces him.
Yep.
Because Johnson has no plan to defend. He's going to fall back into the city. And I don't think he's wrong about this. He's going to fall back into the city and let Sherman kind of Vicksburg him and run the clock out to the 1864 election.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is Davis doesn't want to lose that vital supply hub. He'd already lost Chattanooga. He lost Mobile. And then there's 25,000 loyal citizens that he's going to basically have to sacrifice if he's going to do this.
Yeah.
He's going to lose that manufacturing center. So he wants someone to fight. He doesn't want to run the clock out. He wants to win and push him back is what he wants to do.
Mhm.
Good defense is good offense, right?
Yeah.
That's what his plan is. So he's going to replace him right around July 20th, right around there. And he's going to ultimately put a guy in charge who most of the higher level Confederate brass don't like in John Bell Hood. Lee said he's a good fighter, but he can't handle the big chair.
No,
Hardee hated him, right?
Yeah.
Even guys like Arthur Manigault, the lower level guys like this guy, they looked at him as an over-aggressive, pretty boy from the Army of Northern Virginia who didn't understand fighting in the West. He wasn't one of them. And first thing he's going to do is going to set up this fantastic plan to defend the Peachtree Creek area. And he's going to have 7 divisions. He's going to attack 4 Union divisions. So far, so good. You're going to fight. But the problem was, as we talk about the episode and the battle, is for whatever reason, Hardee, it's kind of like you, just half-asses it on a day at work. Forget it. It's Monday. He doesn't go all in. Instead of 7 divisions, he actually fights with 7 brigades, which is a bad formula going against against George Thomas and Sherman.
Yeah. The battle is absolute chaos. And getting back to Hood taking command, I mean, I think you and I are on the same page as this, that this was not a good decision. Hood was in over his head. Now, that does not mean Hood is a bad soldier or whatever. He's good at Gaines Mill. He is good at Gettysburg until he gets wounded. He's still good.
He go to Gettysburg 5 seconds into it. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, but he's good. But he comes back, fights at Chickamauga, and he's the one leading that breakthrough with his men. He's out in front with his men, but he's not. He is not suited to be an army commander. And I know people will say like, well, what, he had bad subordinates, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it also goes back to you as the leader of the army, and that I think he is in over his head. Hood was much better lower down in command, the same way that Ambrose Burnside on the Union side is. Frank's on here. He said, happy 160th of Howard getting command of the Army of Tennessee, of the Army of the Tennessee.
Wow, big space. Where's your hat, by the way?
Oh, my Howard hat.
I just got a Howard hat now. Anyway, but no, that's the thing, is for whatever reason, and we've been kind of hard on Hood, but the thing about it is, this is a situation where his plan's really, really good, but for whatever reason, his subordinates, namely Hardee, doesn't do what he's supposed to do.
No.
And a lot of it, I mean, is it Hardee's fault that William Bate, who's the first attacking division, gets lost in a swamp and goes the wrong way? I don't know. Maybe you can make a case for that. Shot Pouch Walker fights pretty hard, no question about that. George Maney doesn't fight. He's going to start to march. He sees the Union troops. He's going to bump into some Union guys under John Newton, and they're just going to stop and drop and roll and just stay in their stomachs and not move forward. And then it goes right down the line. This is supposed to be an echelon attack.
Yeah.
And Hood obviously got this idea from Gettysburg Day 2 under Longstreet. There's no question that's where he got it from.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to work as they go. But when you have 2 corps, you have Hardee on the right and Alexander Stevens on the right, Stuart, on the left. Stuart's the only one who really fights. And so instead of it getting stronger, it gets weaker as they go.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have the Union guys like John Geary, Alpheus Williams, and his fantastic facial here. Well, Newton's going to be on the right.
Yeah.
But you had situations like William T. Ward, who was late to the party, and he gets there right in time to stop any breakthrough. And if you're a Hood, you're sitting back going, this plan was so good. It was a great move. But again, the he was supposed to hit them as they were crossing Peachtree Creek.
Yeah.
And because the Union on the right side starts to move towards Atlanta, Blackjack Logan is a 15 Corps.
Yeah.
He has to move, he has to stop his army, wait a few hours, shift over Benjamin Cheatham to the east to create a bigger gap, and it slows everything down. His big deal was we have to start at 1 p.m., 1 o'clock sharp.
4.
Right. It gets going between about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, somewhere in the
Yeah.
afternoon. So by then, Thomas has crossed Peachtree Creek. He set up a defensive line
Yeah.
with his 4 divisions. And now you're going to have Hood attacking a defensive earthworks who set up and are ready for them. So here comes the offense. But again, it's pretty even strength overall.
Yeah.
You're going to have 7 divisions against 4 divisions. Okay, sounds good. But basically, a good percentage of them, Bath, Maney, guys like Samuel French, they don't even go.
Mhm.
They just stay and don't move for whatever reason. They don't attack. Now you can sit there and say, well, it's because they just didn't want to. Maybe they didn't like Hood. Maybe they didn't think we should be fighting offensive. But for whatever reason, his plan on paper, which is really, really good, it's like they all ignored it except a couple of guys.
Well, that's kind of a pattern in the Army of Tennessee. I mean, since it's, you go back to Chickamauga when Bragg was in charge and how kind of chaotic it was then. But you look at I I did have the opinion at one point, and then I read more and learned more, that Hood was looking for the command deliberately the entire time. But when you look at the primary source documents and what people have said, that's probably not the case. I don't think he wanted the command, and he knew. He was like, shit. He was trying to basically he went to Davis and he's like, you got to put someone else in command. And because Hood didn't want it. Now, the other thing that happened too is Joseph E. Johnston had told Hood, yeah, I'll stick around and help you with the transition, but I got to go to Atlanta with my wife for a day. And he goes and he never comes back. So Hood is basically, he's under the impression he's going to have Johnston there helping him. And he doesn't show up. He basically ghosts him. Now, Hood would remain bitter about that for the rest of his life.
Well, this is why we were saying before, and people debate and talk about the significance of the loss of Albert Sidney Johnston at Shawmut, right? But this is what we've been talking about. For whatever reason, they could not get a commanding general after him who everyone fought for. No. I mean, you bring in Braxton Bragg, and it starts pretty well with him overall. Good battle at Chickamauga, good plan, but they don't like him. It's all personal stuff. It's all Mean Girls crap.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the way it always is.
Yeah. Longstreet comes to save the day and he thinks he's going to take over. Then he goes to Nashville and gets pantsed by Burnside. And then they're going to replace Bragg finally with Johnson, who's kind of a steady Eddie. He's your grandpa who's not going to do anything wrong, but he's not going to lose you a war.
Yeah.
But when he falls back, Resaca, Dallas, all the battles we've talked about from that 100-mile stretch from Chattanooga to Atlanta, it's the monster is getting closer to the door, and then you get the sniping now. People like Hood, people like Hardee saying he had many a chance to fight in the north. I mean, north of Atlanta, and just never took battle. He was always fighting defensive.
Yeah,
and of course that's going to piss you off because Davis knew the fall of Atlanta was the game. And he knew it was. For the election, for supplies, they were getting choked out because everything else that's going on there. Monocracy's going on around now. Petersburg's going on around now. Everything's happening at this time. So every day is a bad day. It's a bad news day for Jeff Davis. So he's thinking, well, I put in an offensive guy. Maybe I can get lucky the way I did with Lee. On June 1st of 62. Maybe I can turn the peninsula, flip the narrative, and make it into the 7 days. And I can find a guy who's going to push him away. But again, like we said in the episode, that's great, but Hood's not Lee.
No.
And that's the problem. And I think Hood, after being with Jackson, being with Lee, kind of thought he might have looked in the mirror and thought maybe he was a little bit of Lee.
Yeah.
But there's only one Robert E. Lee. And Davis, I think, was reaching at straws at that point. And that's what got him. No question.
Yeah. No, there's some debate going on about Howard versus Hancock right now. Elsie said jealous Hancock was never good enough to command an army unlike Howard. James said Howard never ran for president, though.
Yeah, but
And
I
MJ said
mean,
Hancock is more screen time in the movie Gettysburg.
yeah, well, if you're basing it on the movie Gettysburg, I don't know what to tell you, you know. But I think what the reality is, you know, you look at these guys and in seeing on the political level, and both Lincoln in the early part of the war and Davis in the later part of the war, they're playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
They're trying to and find that combination to work, and it's a lot of stops and starts, especially in the West when Davis was making trip after trip out west to find out what the hell's going on, because as you know, things are going great in the East at the beginning, and then when everything
Mhm.
starts to go bad, and that union number disparity and the manufacturing disparity finally starts to take over, you really see it, and then you see the grasping at straws. Hood Hood being put in place was their Doug Flutie
Yep.
Hail Mary moment. That's what it was. If it worked out, if Hood came up, pushed them back at Peachtree, drove them back towards Chattanooga,
Yeah.
it would have been brilliant. Hood would have been Stonewall Jackson. He would have been.
Yeah.
But again, plan was good. It just didn't work out. William Hardee was probably the one. But again, when you look at this, it's easy to pig pile on Hardee. It's easy to pig pile on Hood, but it's easy to forget how good George Thomas was
Exactly. Yeah.
in the
And that
Army of the
doesn't get
Cumberland.
talked about enough.
It's a
Yeah.
lot. It's a lot like John Schofield of Spring Hill. You could talk a lot about sleeping at the switch and Cheatham
Yeah.
letting him get by, and all the Hood stuff. But that's a good plan by Schofield. It's Spring Hill.
It is.
So not
And
and this was a good plan here. Admittedly, it didn't work out the best overall though,
yeah.
because you had situations where, Ward is late to get there. There's stories he's drunk.
Yeah.
Future President Benjamin Harrison is a brigade commander. He's going to be one of three men who's going to lead the charge
Hmm.
to slow down Loring and keep the Confederates from breaking that gap. But again, it's easy to we're such a negative focused society. You know, if
Yes.
your football team loses, you say we suck. You never give credit to the other team. You always say and that's
Yeah.
kind of how we're wired. This is a situation like that where Thomas, I think, deserves more credit than Hood and Hardee deserve for getting pantsed,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I think Thomas, even today, he gets compared a lot to Grant, and he's still seen as being plodding and methodical. But in his own day, Thomas was very respected. And one of the quotes from Howard's memoirs after Hood
Oh,
took command of the, are you okay?
yeah,
He just kind of groaned.
I put my fingernail went too deep. Now it hurts.
God.
I'm just take a few sick days now.
So yeah, Howard wrote, that when Hood, like Johnson was a match for Sherman, like, and they were having to fight, do those battles and stuff. But he said of Hood, like, Hood had never been up against somebody like Sherman and Thomas as an army commander, Thomas specifically as an army commander.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Howard, he had very, very, very high respect for Thomas as one of the, he put Thomas up there with Grant and Sherman for how he felt. And I think he actually thought, he said he implies that Thomas was the best of the army commanders in the Western theater. He was better than Sherman when it came to like executing plans and all that. He said, someone just came on here and said Howard was a big fan of himself. Not
I
really. Okay.
don't know about
I don't know.
that.
I don't
Okay.
really agree with that.
No, no.
Morning, AQ.
Yeah. AQ, she was back from her big visit down in Jersey.
Yes. Yeah, she's got that cool Civil War dress as well. And she was down there for
She's
Arabella, which is awesome.
she spends so much time in Jersey. I'm gonna start calling her Snooky.
Jeez.
But no, that's great that she does have living history like a lot of people do. But you're right though. I mean, these people have they all have their moments, no question about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Right?
they do. And I mean the interesting thing about, Howard takes command and he's like, Sherman goes to tell him, you're going to probably be taking over the army. And the first thing Howard says is, shouldn't this go to Hooker? And Sherman just is like, we do not want Hooker in command of this army. We want,
No, but he makes
for
an appearance
reasons.
though. He
Yep,
makes an appearance at Peachtree's.
yeah. Hooker is at Peachtree. He's commanding the 20th Corps, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be long after Howard takes command and after the Battle of Ezra Church that Hooker gets real ticked off and he leaves. And I think it was a huge relief because when he left,
Yeah.
Slocum was able to come back Slocum is there to walk into Atlanta because Slocum, when he got out to the Western Theater after the three of them went out there, Howard, Slocum, and Hooker. Slocum was like, I'm not serving with Hooker. I'm not. And they sent him like up close to Vicksburg because he just flat out, he was like, I'm not doing this. So when he leaves, they're able to bring Slocum back down, which is a
Yeah, that there are certain people. He was definitely someone who, was very confident fella in Joseph Hooker. Here in Massachusetts, Joseph Hooker's a
yeah.
hero. He's at that great statue downtown,
I like Hooker. He's a
right
cool
across
guy.
street from the 54th Mass. But again, he's somebody who is very polarizing in a lot of people because he's like McClellan, like a lot of the guys, they always feel that they're the smartest people in the room and they have all the answers. And
Yeah.
Joseph Hooker was definitely one of them. He was a party boy.
Yeah.
He definitely had his fun. Part of that whole triumvirate there with guys like Sickles and Butterfield and in different parts of the army. There's a lot of guys like that. But you're talking about men from different parts of the country all suddenly thrown together.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like, yeah, some of these guys went to West Point together years prior to, but again, you're talking about alpha dog types. Okay, you're talking about you make the level of general. You're doing so because you're very confident in yourself in most cases, and that's what these guys were. We saw exactly when we were talking on the Confederate side when Johnston wanted to attack the railroad line north of Atlanta, and he wanted to get cavalry from Alabama because he didn't want to risk his own men. And then when Davis said no, use your own guys, Wheeler came back, Joseph Wheeler, and said, I tried to get him to do this, and he said no. Yeah. So every one of them is trying to claim credit. And the Battle of Peachtree Creek was actually Joseph E. Johnston's plan.
Yeah.
It was very similar to Chattanooga with the breakthrough, the Cracker Line. When Grant gets all the credit for that, when it's really Rosecrans who really laid the fun. Now Grant had to execute it, so give him credit for that. Just like Hood had to execute this one. But again, everyone want to be that man, right? They want the guy. And that's and it's not a knock at them because they all realize whoever was the star at the end was probably be president. How many presidents? I mean, Benjamin Harrison from this battle was president.
James Garfield from Chickamauga.
Burbsy McPherson probably would have been president if he wasn't killed a week later in Atlanta.
He was killed. Was it 2 days after?
Yeah, right after. Yeah,
after Peachtree. James mentions that Hooker did all right at Chattanooga, and yeah, he definitely did. Like Lookout Mountain. I know it's not a large scale battle, but to finally see that American flag up top again and you drive the rebels off of it, that's a big thing. And that painting, by the way, in the visitor center at Lookout Mountain is beautiful.
All David Ireland, all 137th.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but they all are smaller parts of the bigger thing. Of course, Missionary Ridge and Thomas gets all the credit for Chattanooga, and as he should. Sherman, again, doesn't have a good day at this one. Great day for Patrick Clayburne. And, if you want to drive around Missionary Ridge and roll them up and lock them and take your life in your own hands and go see the battlefield, you certainly can. But Lookout Mountain is I don't want to say it's a must-have, but I mean it's a good place to put artillery. You're in great high ground, and we're not talking about the peak where you see all the pictures on the mountain. We're talking where the battlefield was, which is about halfway up the mountain.
Yeah,
and it's a great visit. It's fantastic visit. Especially when you go when it's foggy. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful view up there. The drive is quite fun too. Fun. It's up windy roads up the mountain and stuff. Elsie, what would Howard's wrestling move be? The People's Flying Elbow.
It probably would be,
But yeah, like in Chattanooga, securing that in November of 1863 is huge because that is opening the gateway to Atlanta and allows Sherman to start his Atlanta campaign in May of 1864. And you've got, we've talked about Kennesaw and Pickett's Mill, the two battles that happened before Peachtree Creek. But Peachtree Creek is really because Sherman at this point has crossed the Chattahoochee. And as we talked about in the episode, there's no going back after that. Sherman can't go back. He's like committed to getting the city of Atlanta. And the next episode we're going to look at, not our next episode, but the next episode we'll look at in the Atlanta campaign is going to be one of the final battles before Hood vacates the dance floor, and that is the Battle of Jonesboro.
Yeah, and people look at the anniversaries now. It's obviously a big Eastern Theater anniversary too, but Western Theater, this Atlanta stuff is all going on now.
Yeah,
160 years ago. Yeah. And so Jonesboro is a really good one. Decatur is one that I don't think we have a plan to do an episode on that one, but that's another good one. And right off the bat, you're seeing the dominoes falling one after the other, which is going to lead to the end of Atlanta.
Mhm.
And you're going to see those great letters between Sherman and Hood
Oh
going back
God, I
and
love those.
forth. As Atlanta finally falls on September 2nd of 1864, which really sealed the deal, to the election. It
Yeah.
really did. If Monocacy, if Washington had fallen, if Lew Wallace hadn't done his thing, you wonder if the victory at Atlanta would have still sealed. They probably still would have sealed it, realistically speaking.
Yeah, but I don't think
But
it would have, I think it would have, I don't know if it would have meant as much, or maybe it would have meant more. Who knows? I know Sherman in his memoirs, Sherman being Sherman, he is like, this is why the president won the election. He takes full credit for it,
well, that's
which is very William T. Sherman. And don't get me
no,
wrong,
he does.
I really like William T. Sherman. His memoirs are such a great read. He's so vivid and descriptive. Like,
He's vivid, but he also every fish he caught was that big.
oh, I know.
I
It's like
mean,
he's
and that, but
how
that's
Jews
Grant.
do.
Grant's memoirs are the same.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
Grant. Grant. What he does is he doesn't embellish the stuff he did for the most part. What he does is he doesn't even mention the things he didn't like Lookout Mountain. Doesn't even mention it really.
He
He
calls
throws
it
all
pure
yeah,
romance.
he throws a line in, but doesn't even mention it. But that's again how they do it. I mean, he's writing his memoirs towards the end of his life, and he's got limited time, so he's probably going to write what he's going to write about.
Yeah.
I still think Grant's memoirs are the best read on the city, just because it's just a fantastic. It's very vivid. He's very good. Sherman's very similar, very similar. Sherman does a lot of "It Wasn't Me." He does a lot of he does a lot of that.
Yeah.
But that's the scoop,
I recommend, obviously, because just I'm biased, but I do, like, I tell, because Howard's aren't as read as much, but I say to get a different perspective from a person who fought in East and West and fought with Sherman. And Howard in his memoirs does correct Sherman on some stuff. He will say, like, well, Sherman said this in his memoirs, but I've got the order right in front of me, and this is what it actually said. So he does do that. He's very funny in his memoirs. Like that he said that, that quote we had in this episode where he said it was to the Confederates were much chagrined that they had lost the battle, and we were much joyful because we had won, something like that. Like, it was just, he's getting that little dig in. And I
Yeah.
think it's because I don't think and Howard writes his wife on July 23rd, 1864, and she must have asked him in a letter, so what's Hood like? And he was like, he's a stupid fellow.
Yeah, him calling him a stupid fellow is pretty funny. But there was a lot of passive aggressive stuff. We talked about at the end of this battle, when Davis is talking about Hood, and he's talking about the he strikes manly blows, that quote, right? And then Joseph E. Johnson starts using that to make fun of Hood. He starts calling him the striker of manly blows.
Yeah.
Because of course he knows that he's lost at that point. He's lost Peachtree, he's lost Ezra, lost Decatur, lost Atlanta. So it's a very passive aggressive. You can imagine how some of these guys just hated each other by the end. They you talk about the famous ones, Rosecrans, Grant, probably. You talk about Bragg and probably everybody.
Yeah.
But you talk about well, he just was. But then you talk about Hood, Joseph E. Johnson, and this is a guy who is extremely underrated. He was there at the very beginning, from right at Fort Sumter, all to the beginning of Harper's Ferry, all the way until Bentonville, the very end. He survives the whole thing. And he was someone, for the most part, does really, really well.
Yep.
But he wasn't aggressive. He was passive. He was vanilla. That's who he was.
Yeah, he just was not. There is a question here from James that's really good. He said, why didn't Johnson contest the crossing? Ideal chance, even with fewer men. Even the military mastermind, Jeff Davis, was bemused. So why did he not fight back when Sherman is crossing the Chattahoochee, I think is what James means.
Well, because he was flanked by that point.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that gigantic defensive line set up with those Shupidades and the 91 guns, I believe it was, and 10 miles of breastworks. It was they call it the Civil War Manigault line. No, the what do you call it? Maginot line. From World War II.
Yeah.
I can't say the word for some reason, but he has his defense. It's all set and ready to go. And he's anticipating that Sherman's going to hit him there. But if he doesn't, he's going to go around his left again. So he strengthens that left-hand side. But this is where Sherman gets smart. At this very last moment, for the first time, he goes the other way. And he sends Schofield and McPherson around his right. He gets behind, crosses the Chattahoochee to the north, and now his position's untenable. So
Yep.
that line becomes completely obsolete because now you're going to fight on both sides. So he has to retreat back across the Chattahoochee, which he had his headquarters, by the way. So even he knew the line wasn't the
Yep.
safest in the world. And he has to reset up a mile or so south, which begins that Peachtree Creek line. But he intended to fight him to cross that river, but Sherman pantsed him again and got around him,
Yep.
and that's why. But he had every intention of fight. He was going to fight defensive. That was going to be their final, the big finale. But Sherman got around his back again. And
Yeah.
he didn't think he was going to be able to get around his back this time. And
No.
Sherman found a way because he was good at the maps. He knew how to read the area well.
Oh yeah.
And he set this up all the way. Every time I move, I go this way. So at the last moment, I'm going this way.
Yeah.
And they were like, and Johnson was stunned. He's got to fall back. All those breastworks, which are still there, by the way, you can go visit certain along the shot, all those Shupadates. You can still see some of the breastworks. He has to fall back, so
Yeah.
so the defenses become obsolete.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And
that's credit to Sherman.
yeah, well, that's a great question too.
Yeah.
Elsie says, I always thought Sherman was a better Rosecrans. Both were good campaign strategy guys, but not good tactically once the battle is joined. And he also
Yeah.
says the Atlanta campaign is basically a larger scale Tullahoma campaign. Tullahoma is what was said by President Lincoln, one of the most brilliant campaigns in the Civil War.
Oh yeah, Sherman was, if on a sports mentality, he's a great general manager,
Very much.
but he's
Yeah.
not. But he's not a good coach.
No.
He'll tell you, here's the plan, but when it's time to execute the plan, that's not his strength, right? And he didn't really back away from that. Some guys were great at fighting.
Yep.
Lee was a rare situation where he was a great planner and a good executor. And
Yep.
that's what ultimately got Hood, because he thought, if this guy could do it, I could probably do it. I
Yeah.
watched Lee for a couple of years, but it just goes to show not everyone's cut from the same cloth here. Everyone
No.
hits their ceiling, and you could be like we said with the old saying, you could be the greatest players don't always make the best coaches.
Yep, exactly. And that I think is the case for Hood here. And as far as Sherman goes, Sherman is great writing down battles on paper, but you have a few people, Howard included, mentioning that, when it came time to execute the plan,
Yeah.
he just he froze. It not really froze, but that wasn't his strong area. Now, Sherman is lucky in that he has some of the greatest subordinates, in my opinion, in the Civil War. He has Thomas. And yes, I'm going to put, Howard and Slocum as very, very good subordinates as well. I know I'm going to get teased for that.
Well, but you think of, but in all seriousness, though, how many battles can you really attribute to Sherman being successful? Right? I mean, Chickasaw Bayou got pantsed. Yeah. Kennesaw, bad idea, got pantsed. Pickett's Mill, pantsed. I mean, that's a tough one for him, though.
I put more of that on Thomas and Howard, because
and don't forget too, Missionary Ridge got beat by Claiborne. Yeah. But that's the deal. But he got them there. He marched 100 miles he took Atlanta to the March to the Sea. He's a great engineer, great knew how to read maps. He was fantastic at it. He was great at getting people where you needed to be. But when it came time to fight, that wasn't his strength, right? And that's what made Grant great. Great planner. Grant had balls the size of soccer balls too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he would go into. So Grant is a person that Elsie said Team Slocum. Me too. I really like Slocum. He's I need to study him more. He's such a cool guy. But like, Grant is a great example of the evolution of somebody in the Civil War that learned from their mistakes. And there was a lot of them that did. Claiborne does. Now, Claiborne is like, whatever you needed to be, what Claiborne was, he had. Kind of the same way as John Brown Gordon is real, also badass too. But Grant, he's not very good at the beginning of the Civil War. And there's people that, they'll say like, well, maybe if they brought Grant in and replaced McClellan in 1862, we would have won the war sooner. It's like, do you really want 1862 Grant in charge at that point? You probably don't, because he's not the Grant in 1864.
No, they all learn, they all progress. The good ones do anyway. Grant certainly did. A lot of guys peaked out and did their primary jobs as high as they were going to get. Hood obviously comes to mind. Even Hancock comes to mind. I mean, Hancock was limited to what he could do. They all did. But again, the great ones, the Grants, the Lees, I mean, and they could execute, they could plan, and they could deliver. And the brilliance of a Lee was that he gave his subordinates a lot of slack. He gave them a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Grant was a little bit different. Grant was much more hands-on to it.
Yeah.
But Grant, you can tell a good manager if you make the subordinates better. Most people who served under Grant got better, right? Yeah. And so that's how you can tell you're a good boss is the people who work for you get better at their jobs. And that's not always the case for a lot of guys.
You could argue the same with Sherman as well. When you look at men like Thomas and then later on like Howard and Slocum, they got better. They kind of shone more in the Eastern or in the Western theater. And James mentions like, no teasing here, Howard and Slocum were excellent support and worked well with Kill Cavalry. Kilpatrick is Sherman's cavalry guy, and he's got a reputation by the time he comes west, but he's the, I don't want to say the exact idiot that Sherman needed on the march to be the cavalry, but he is. He's that kind of loose cannon, but Sherman's able to keep him reined in enough. And Kilpatrick doesn't do bad on the march to the sea. The other thing too is that, Sherman would listen to his subordinates. There was one incident, I think, before Howard took command of Army of the Tennessee, and Sherman said, well, I don't think they're going to attack. And Howard's like, no, they're going to do something here. That's what I feel. And Sherman's like, okay. And then it happened. And Sherman went back to Howard after and said, well, you were right about that. And I was wrong. And then with Ezra, Howard is setting up his line and Sherman's basically telling him he's being way too paranoid. And Howard's like, no, I've been here before. Yeah, it was at Chancellorsville. The terrain was the same. He's like, I've been here before.
Sherman tells him they're going to attack you front on. Why are you defending your flanks so bad? He's like, I've kind of been here before, dude. and what happened was he got hit in his flank.
Yep.
Right. St. Lee, all those guys, they hit him, and Howard was ready this time. So they all learn. I mean, none of these guys. I mean, again, some people had experience in Mexico, but even West Point people. Yeah. West Point at that point before the war, it was basically an engineering school. Mm-hmm. It really, really was. So a lot of these people learned on the fly, and a lot of the great ones didn't even go to West Point because they had to learn their experiences based on field experience. And that's a big part of it. But again, you mentioned Kilpatrick. He was the exact opposite of Dave McMurtry Gregg and the opposite of John Buford, but he was more like Custer. But again, when you look at a Kilpatrick, you have to understand, these guys don't have a lot of experience coming into this.
No.
And now but Kilpatrick has subordinates like Custer, like Elon Farnsworth. Okay. On the other side, Buford, we're talking about Gettysburg now, has guys like Wesley Merritt, who were all promoted 3 days before to be generals. So these guys didn't have a lot of field experience either. And Custer is going to basically take after his boss, Kilpatrick. Kilpatrick, of course, is going to famously get Farnsworth killed, and William Wells and the First Vermont and all that stuff over at South Cavalry Field. But again, that's how you learn. And you see a little bit of Kilpatrick, his aggressiveness toned back a little bit when he's the one who's chasing down Lee on his retreat when they get to Monterey Pass.
Yeah.
He gets there, but he's not crazy aggressive like he would have been. No. And again, Kilpatrick, fun fact about him, he's the only person in the Civil War to have his picture taken with a prostitute, and it's on. And you can Google it. You see a picture of him on a front step with a prostitute. But that's who he was.
For him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm shocked, but not really by that coming from Judge.
Best I can tell, he's the only one. And so you can Google the picture and type Kilpatrick, and you can see him. There's a woman next to him, and she's a prostitute.
Wow. God.
He gave 0 Fs.
You read about him. Well, there was the one, and this is why I say that it sounds like the Western theater was a little bit more, I don't know. I don't want to say fun, but there's that one story where Sherman is like saying to Kilpatrick, and Howard's there and Slocum's there, and they're all talking about what they're going to do next. And I think it's when they're into the Columbia campaign. Their march through the Carolinas, their march through Carolina, and they're headed towards Columbia. And Sherman's like, well, you need to go over here. He says this to Kilpatrick. And Kilpatrick's like, well, how do you want me to let you know when I've arrived? And Sherman just says to him, well, burn a bridge or something.
Yeah. Well,
like that guy, like, I mean, I laughed when I read that because that's funny. Like, well, burn a bridge.
Yeah.
And we'll know you've got to where you need to be.
Well, that's what I do.
Yeah, ghost of
Dan,
sickle cell. You burn a bridge.
Dan, where are you right now? Just burn a bridge. I'll find you.
Yeah, burn a bridge.
Yeah.
Grant says Sherman was a good manager considering he was able to make better the Army of Potomac generals who were transferred. That's yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we were saying is that
Yeah.
people like that, they may, but again, you could be a great, I use football analogies all the time with this. You could
Yeah.
be a great coach where you focus on defense,
Yeah.
or a great coach you focus on offense, and you can win either way. But your forte is going to be on one side or the other. Sherman was a strategist. He was a planner.
Yeah.
You know, he was someone who was probably good at chess, right?
Oh yeah.
And you know, and Grant was much more. He was not a bad planner, but he was also somebody who he knew what he had to do, and he had the stones to do it. You know, you talk about that whole situation for Fort Henry and Donelson. You get Fort Henry without even having to use your infantry. Well, this is going to be easy. Then you get into Donelson, you realize this is going to be friggin' bad. And he's still able to, you know, because guys like Lew Wallace, for example, are able to step up and do it. But I don't think you're going to find a more aggressive Union general like Grant.
No.
Just like you're not going to find a more aggressive Confederate general than Lee, because he was very aggressive. He hated the idea of falling back on defense. He liked the idea of seizing the initiative. That was always the thing, seize the initiative. And that trickled down to people like Jackson. Didn't trickle down so much to Longstreet, because Longstreet was cut from a different cloth.
Yeah.
But then when you start to see when Jackson gets killed, and A.P. Hill and Richard Ewell are going to take over now, they're both used to being directly under Jackson with specific orders.
Yes.
Versus Ewell is not that aggressive. A.P. Hill is more aggressive, but he's always sick.
Yep.
Right.
From his little jaunt in New York.
So you're right, but Ewell is cautious, but he still is able to defeat Milroy at Second Winchester. You know, he can plan it and execute it, but he's not going to go, you know, ass over tea kettle like a Jackson would.
Yeah.
But they're different people. That's when you study this war and study these armies, you're going to realize that every one of these guys has different attributes. They have different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And just because you can say, well, you know, Howard didn't do this, well, that's not his strength. You know, Hancock did this, Howard did this, Rosecrans did this, Grant didn't do. Well, because you're different people.
Yeah, they're all different. They all have different personalities, and those personalities sometimes clash. And there's, you know, decisions are made for reasons. I mean, I think, you know, we'll probably end up doing an episode about the March to the Sea around the 160th, looking at kind of the logistics behind it and, you know, what Sherman had to do going into that, because it's a lot of planning. But, you know, he's not just nonchalantly picking Slocum and Howard to be the wing commanders. There's reasons, because he said it in his memoirs. He said needed guys that were gonna execute what I wanted and not go off script too much. You don't need a Blackjack Logan in there. Now, I love Logan. He's great study, but he is not the man to lead an army in this case, let alone a wing.
No, Blackjack was great with the 15th Corps. He was great. Yeah. He was a guy who was slated to potentially take over for the Army of the Cumberland for Thomas in Nashville. Yeah. So he almost had his chance if Hood didn't attack right away in Nashville. He might have got his chance. But yeah, everybody has their limits. I mean, you can visit Logan's Circle in Washington, D.C. I mean,
still not been there.
Yeah, it's not far from DuPont, but it's a nice area. But these are famous people because they're not frontline named people.
Yeah,
they kind of drive by and go, "Who the hell is Logan?" You know, I mean, but that's who it is.
You know? Well, you have and then you have Jefferson C. Davis, who is why he's even still commanding, because he murdered Bull Nelson. I question that move, but he's aggressive as well, and he's living up to his name with how he feels about certain things as well, because you have the incident with Ebenezer Creek and all that. But he definitely was another person that could not have been in charge either.
No, you need I mean, at the end of the day, it's the right people in charge of the right thing. I mean, that's not a slight on any of these guys, on Johnson or Lee or any of these people who eventually would take over. At the end of the day, it's you fight with your best you have.
Yeah.
You know, Lee is someone who consistently, I realize he lost at Gettysburg and blah, 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 the whole deal, but he, for the most part, was consistent.
Yeah.
And the men loved him, but he fought aggressively. He was a unique balance of strategy and execution,
Hmm.
which I don't think anybody else in the South had. Uh, because then everyone wanted to be like him. Like you mentioned this episode with Hood, you train basically under Lee. I'm going to be like him.
Yeah.
You think of your own lives. The best managers you've ever had at your jobs. You say, if I'm ever a manager, I'm going to be like this guy, right? That's what they are. But doesn't mean you can do it. There's a
Yeah.
reason why they are who they are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Ghost of Sickles Legs said, "Who is Logan? He's the Wolverine." Great movie. Yeah, the Wolverine Deadpool movie's out. It's getting great reviews.
Oh, good. Another superhero movie. I haven't had one of
Imagine
those.
Blackjack Logan as Wolverine.
Looks like him a little bit, kind
Yeah,
of,
he
sort
kind of
of.
does. He's got the hair. Well, he's got like really thick hair when you look at him.
No,
Frank says hashtag justice for Bull Nelson.
Bull Nelson.
What was that
I,
over anyway? Why was he shot? Like, what was
I think they
Davis's
were just.
problem with
I forget. I think they were. I think they were just. I think he insulted him, or just went. He did something like that, and so Bull Nelson was. He was a big fella, and he wasn't gonna have it. He was Jeff Davis shot him, and he got away with it. I mean, it's a different world right now. Although people can still get away with murder now,
Yeah.
I guess, right?
You probably know this that Alpheus Williams was on the March to the Sea.
Yeah. I would love if I could do this to create a facial hair like Alpheus Williams.
Yeah, I'm
If I
just
could do
looking
it.
at his picture right now. That's
He's got
crazy.
I mean, and the thing about it though is he did this with straight razors. I mean, he had someone do it for him, but I mean, how the hell
Yeah.
you pull that off? That's legit. That's crazy facial hair right there.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his picture right now. But yeah, we'll definitely do like a episode about the logistics of the March to the Sea.
The only person with better facial hair than Alpheus Williams was Tilly Pierce. Now she was probably French Canadian. That's probably why.
What? So random.
I don't know. Always up on Canada. You know?
Logan would be Mike TV's dad in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, that's
Cringy salesman.
Yeah, he was definitely kind of a slippery guy, but he was good though. I mean,
Oh,
he was a good.
He was one of the good political generals for sure.
No, he certainly was.
Not like Franz Siegel.
Well, I mean, you could the political you could take a peek at all the big boys. Obviously, Sickles comes to mind. There's a lot of them, but sometimes a guy like Logan, he took what he didn't have to unlearn what he had learned previously.
Yeah.
He just did what he did. I mean, you don't get to his level, Corps Command, with being a joke. I mean, you just don't, you know.
No, and he's in that picture, I think, of Sherman's staff on the March to the Sea.
Yeah.
The one that you photoshopped one time and put a shark head on Sherman.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Pretty sure you did.
I'm sure I did. I just don't remember, you know. But a lot of these people, and what's great about studying a battle like Peachtree is you get to talk about people who don't get a lot of credit. Guys specific like William Loring, the Confederate side, who did really, really well. And it also shows. I mean, if you're Loring, you're moving forward. To your right is George Maney, who doesn't do a damn thing. Edward Walthal's to your left, he does well. But then you got Samuel Gibbs French, who again doesn't even move. So it's similar. And these are division commanders.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like Gettysburg where your brigade commanders aren't moving.
Yeah.
This is that's why Peachtree is a big what if on the Confederate side and a big missed opportunity, is because a lot of these guys should know better. They really should.
It could have gone, and it's like there's still going to be, it's only July 20th when Peachtree is fought. There's still another 6 weeks out from getting the city of Atlanta. And Sherman was kind of angry that they didn't, Blackjack didn't move forward more quickly because he's like right there at Atlanta's doorstep. And then you're going to fall into the siege and you're going to have a series of battles kind of just around the city. I can't imagine being a citizen in Atlanta at this point. That must have just been horrific.
Well, that was the problem, is that story that once Blackjack finally moved in from Decatur, which really kind of put a crimp in Hood's plan.
Yeah.
They start firing artillery. And there's a story where a little girl's walking across the street with their parents and she gets killed by an artillery shell walking across the street. Obviously a civilian. But these people in Atlanta, and you read Gone with the Wind,
Yep.
And you talk about this fear of, oh my God, Sherman's coming, and we could hear him. They build up this monster of what he was. And the first half of Gone with the Wind's really good because it talks.
Yep.
The second half sucks, but the first half is really, really good, and it talks about it. But this was based on reality. I mean, you're getting
Yep.
people, and they're living off of the fear of, wait a second, what if we turn it to Vicksburg? They were eating dogs. They were
That's
starved out of food.
and
And,
rats.
and and this was the big thing. It's like, well, if you're Joseph E. Johnson, do you take that chance
Yep.
and try to run the election out, or by doing that, you're gonna sacrifice this entire city? You're
Yep.
gonna throw away the baby with the bathwater here if you do that. And Davis is like, no, we cannot let Vicksburg happen to Atlanta. We cannot let them siege
Yep.
Atlanta. We have to fight. We have to push them back. We cannot have this our last big manufacturing supply hub with 23,000 loyal Atlanta citizens
Yep.
get basically starved out,
Yep.
which will absolutely would have happened because he cut the railroad to Montgomery. He already had
Yep.
done that. They were trying to keep the Jonesboro train open, right? Claiborne couldn't stop that,
Yep.
so he was setting up the pieces to siege it,
Yeah.
which and then he would have eventually taken it. Now he's saying things like, well, Thomas is going to attack and then we're going to walk right in. But he knew it wasn't going to be easy.
No.
So he knew he was going to have to likely siege it. And you're giving away that city if you do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when
And
when the Confederates finally leave, they burn the city and they blame Sherman for it and blah, blah, the whole thing.
so
The burning of
Sherman
Atlanta.
gets blamed for so much.
That
Those
150 something years later, Tom Brady makes them feel even worse about
yeah.
themselves. And there's so much about Atlanta. They've been through a lot. But again, that was the play. Do we let them siege it,
Yeah.
sacrifice the city, or we fight and go out fighting? And Davis wanted to go out fighting, and Johnson wouldn't do it. He
No.
clearly wouldn't. And hence you bring in Hood. So that's why when you look at that decision, we've said a million times that they just ran the clock out for the election but you're dealing with real people here and humanity. By
Yeah.
doing that, you're costing thousands of civilian lives.
Yeah.
And is it worth it?
Yeah.
And and you can put yourself in that position, put yourself in the shoes of Davis, and you can see the dilemma. Because
Yeah.
you're at a fork in the road, right? And as Yogi Berra says, you get a fork in the road, you take it. He did.
Elsie said, speaking of, so James or Elsie says facial hair, Alpheus wins bar none. James says Gideon Wells had great facial hair too.
He did.
And then AQ mentions The War Outside My Window, The Diary of Leroy Grisham is a great book. She lived in Macon, Georgia, and it tells a story of what she sees, reads, and hears about the war from within Georgia. And then Elsie said, speaking of Alpheus, he is the best equestrian statue of anyone north or south and should be relocated to a battlefield. I've never seen that one before.
No, either.
Where is that, the statue of Alpheus Williams?
I don't know. Good question. I'm sure somebody here knows.
Yeah, Elsie probably knows. But yeah, like and the letters the back and forth letters between Hood and Sherman before Atlanta is taken, they are really like Hood is like blaming Sherman for all this stuff. And Sherman's just like, oh, no, you've been firing stuff too that has been hitting within the city of Atlanta. And let me remind you who started this war. It was not me, it was you guys.
Yeah.
And then the mayor of Atlanta starts appealing to him. And Sherman just is like, you guys, this is war. And it's terrible, but this is war. And then he said, like, once you surrender, I'll share the cracker with you, like the last cracker with you. I'll help you out. And that's what he did. He kept his promise. He helped them out.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the people of Columbia. What did Howard was the one in charge there, and Howard left them what, like 130 cows and rifles to defend themselves?
He left them weapons to defend themselves. He left them beef cattle. I mean, again, this is a reality versus a fiction with a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
People. I've been in Columbia, South Carolina, and they'll swear to you that Sherman burnt the whole city down. And admittedly, he did give his orders not to do it, but at the same time, I don't think he was getting all teary-eyed, getting all blubbery watching the buildings burn either.
No,
but he wasn't like Sheridan in the Valley.
No, sitting back with a cigar and
wasn't enjoying it, making s'mores off of schoolhouses. But the same thing as a lot of these battles. Last thing you do before you vacate the dance floor is you burn it, so the Union doesn't have anything. They did the same thing with Richmond.
Yep.
But thanks to, Mitchell, and thanks to other books and movies that have come out, it makes it sound like that
Yep.
Sherman came in, and that popular thing about how he burned everything in Atlanta and he burned everything in the March of the Sea. But that's historical memory. And
Yep.
as the years go by, it gets stronger and stronger and
Yep.
stronger.
That's why, like, the book Sherman's March, An American Memory, we had the author on. Um, and Sarah Rubin is, now that we're on the 160th of all this happening, Sherman's March, An American Memory by Anne Sarah Rubin is a great read. And I'm probably going to read it again before we do an episode about the March to Sea. But she talks about how memory with Gone with the Wind. And then we had her on our book club. And remember, she talked about that story where she was in Ebenezer Creek and there was that guy that was like, I'll take you there.
Yeah, some local who apparently must. You can only imagine the
And
way
she
she
left a
described
note in her car
the way
about
she described him was, yeah, the overalls going, and just the whole prototypical, central Georgia person, I guess is the way she described it. And he's like, I'll take you over to the actual crossing if you want. And she left a note in her car saying, if I'm killed, this is who did it. Here's where I am.
yeah.
And then I guess gentleman took her out there, showed exactly where it was, brought her
Yeah.
back. And yeah, but that's a ballsy call. That you're a true historian if you're going to put your life
Yeah.
in someone else's hands, and especially if you're a woman by yourself. But that
Oh yeah. Well, she was with a friend of hers, also another female, but
oh, okay.
like, still, but she went to where it all happened to see what it was still like today. And she does a great job at talking like it's a very like, and it's still relevant today, what she talks about. And she wrote the book came out maybe about 10 years ago, I think, but it maybe less than that, but it was, I don't know, she was real fun to talk to and have on. Um, really great time with her.
That was a
Caleb,
while ago we did that.
yeah, that was like almost 3 years ago. Morning,
Yeah.
Caleb. Um,
Oh, it's
El
okay.
Elsie says the statue of Alpheus is in Detroit, and Lynn has
Oh,
seen it. She said it's awesome.
no, I've been to Detroit a handful of times. I haven't seen that statue. So now next time we go up to the Motor City, Mary, we're gonna go check that out. We'll go
Yeah,
see the Lincoln chair too.
that'd be cool. Yeah, the Henry Ford Museum is a great take.
Yeah.
Such a cool place. They got the Kennedy car there too. They got a whole bunch of different stuff there. They've got like more than just the Lincoln chair for Civil War stuff as well. Cisco says, "I'll give you a private tour."
Well,
Like
that's the
that's
thing. It's
how
like
I look.
that's like the historical version of a candy van. You know,
Yeah, I'll give you a private tour.
a little kid, you probably would have fallen for the candy van thing, probably.
No.
Sometimes. Hey, I got a book about Howard in the van.
Uh,
Here,
no.
this is the rag that Howard used at Chancellorsville. Here, breathe into it. Okay. You're gonna fall for it. Wake up with a dumpster somewhere.
I'm not
But
like that.
that's pretty bad though, but no, but again, we're kind of coming into this 1864 anniversary time and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And everyone talks about Overland Campaign. They talk about Petersburg coming up. They talk about all this stuff. But yeah, this Atlanta thing was big. In the summer of 64, we call it the summer of love for Sherman, right?
Yeah.
What was really the nail in the coffin. And any chance that Hood have to save that city and really save the entire Southeast really fell with this battle
Yeah.
with Peachtree. And
And
it's
that's
not
why
a
it's
battle.
so
Yeah.
important to study. It's so important to study the individual battles of the Atlanta campaign because so often it's just like, oh, it's the Atlanta campaign and they won Atlanta. So that means Sherman's the great victor, blah, blah, blah. But when you start drilling down into it, you really see that he's, I mean, I like Sherman, but in some respects, he is kind of overrated. Like, nobody really gives, like, I went to Kennesaw and that's when I was like, why is this guy not getting more crap for Kennesaw? Because when you're up there in Cheatham Hill and you're looking down where the Union troops had to come up, it's like, why would you even attack this position? It's the same at Pickett's Mill. And the
Yeah.
thing about to Pickett's Mill is that Sherman never mentions it in his memoirs at all. And that
No.
really, really ticked Ambrose Bierce off. And I know there's some people that say, they joke it like it's almost an insult to call him bitter Bierce. I'd be a little bitter too if a battle I fought in saw my friends die.
No, Pickett's Mill it's just a bloodletting of a battle.
Oh, it's a
I mean,
bad.
what's great about Pickett's Mill is it's really preserved. It's probably
Yeah.
the best battlefield in Atlanta. That and
Mhm.
Kennesaw, that are preserved. But because this one, obviously, Peachtree's gone, Ezra's gone for the most part. Jonesboro's still there, sort of, but it's for the most part, it's gone.
Did you find Jonesboro to be really sad?
Jonesboro has a negative feel because for the most part, a lot of these battlefields, you get killed, they bury you where you fell, and they take your body, they move you away to Richmond or somewhere else. They just took the bodies and made it into a cemetery. And so it's like the Claiborne Cemetery, you called, and for the big Confederate flag flying over it. But you walk in there and it's all Confederate dead from Jonesboro. And so it's one of kind of a unique situation where they just create a cemetery right then and there.
But it's a very sad place.
Oh, it's a pretty cemetery, but it definitely has kind of a, I don't know, it's got that Bruce Springsteen town feel to it. Like it's kind of an old looking, Back to the Future looking town. There's a train track that goes right by it.
Again, there was no one there when we were there, which was weird.
Yeah, the whole town was like, it was like we went to Andersonville.
Yeah, that was weird.
There was just nobody there in the town. It was like a Twilight Zone episode,
Yeah. Elsie asks George, I want to rock Thomas overrated. No, Thomas is I think he's one of the more, doesn't get talked about enough in the Civil War anymore.
The problem with Thomas is he dies relatively soon after the war, and he burns all of his papers. He clears his history cache.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot about that can come out later on about him. But he was the thing about Thomas, and he had to struggle the entire war because why, Mary? Because he was Virginian.
Yeah.
And so people like Sherman, people like Grant never really completely trusted him because they always felt like he was going to flip at the very end to be a double agent or some damn thing. And all he did was win. All he did was fight for the Union. Never gave any indication whatsoever that he wasn't going to do anything but that.
Yeah.
Nashville, they try to pin Nashville on him, but he ends up winning it anyway. Obviously, he's great at Chickamauga, even though he does kind of take off and is not really there for. He runs up the back door and leaves. Yeah. Great at Mill Springs, right?
Oh yeah, and Lincoln was the one that I think it was Harper's Weekly wanted to do like him on the front page, and Lincoln's like, do not put the Virginian on the front page, which is like, it sucks. Like it's like he's so. I remember telling that to somebody a few months ago, and the person who obviously was a little bit maybe very into Lincoln was like, oh, Lincoln was very misguided. I'm like, no, he's biased against Thomas because he's a Virginian. Like, let's call it like it is here. Oh, Bjorn's on here. He said, nerds, what are we talking about today? Atlanta? We are talking Bjorn? The Atlanta campaign. So if you have any books about Peachtree Creek or the Atlanta campaign in general that you can recommend, Bjorn from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop is on here, one of our sponsors on this podcast. Actually, he's our main
book, the Battle of Peachtree Creek. I'm sure Bjorn knows a guy named Robert D. Jenkins Sr. is a book I use primarily for this. And that's a good book. That's, in my opinion, is the best book on Peachtree Creek. He is very critical of Hood, admittedly, but he's somebody who tells a good story. So Jenkins' book, The Battle of Peachtree Creek, in my opinion, is the best book. And I'm sure Bjorn's got 48 at his disposal he can talk about.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he's heard of that one. I'm sure he even has that one.
You said by Jenkins?
Right, by Robert D. Jenkins Sr.
And there's also another one, Battle of Peachtree Creek by Earl J. Hess as well, that was
very creative author names, by the way, that these battles.
Yep. By Earl J. Hess. Okay. Yeah, so there's a couple books there. Caleb just said he's going to look that one up that you recommended.
Yeah, Jenkins. If you're a Hood guy, I mean, it is what it is. But a lot of the quotes we used in the episode about Lee bashing Hood, saying that he's a good fighter, but he's basically not smart enough to run an army. That a lot, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. It comes from that. And so he's very critical of Hood, but he does basically say, which I think is not exactly rocket science. The plan was good, but for some reason, he could never get people to execute his plan for whatever reason. And no one really understands exactly the reason why. But my opinion, Jenkins' book is the best one. So if you're going to get a book, get that one. But that doesn't mean there's tons of other ones, but that's the one I've always been kind of.
Yeah, Bjorn agrees with you. He said that one is really, really good too.
Yeah.
And then, coming up, we've got, Jonesboro coming up, which is our next Atlanta campaign episode, but our next episode is going to be Ream Station. But for sticking with the Atlanta campaign as well, we kind of saw this episode of Peachtree Creek being, kind of like a sort of a part one, kind of, this is when they really start going for Atlanta. And then now we'll end with Jonesboro at the end of August, where you have it, this is it. They're going to get the union is finally going to get the city. And then Cisco mentions there's a new book out about the Atlanta campaign. Oh yes, and I think Bjorn does have this book, but the one by Dave Powell.
Yeah, Powell's got a new book coming
Yeah,
out, and obviously Powell's fantastic with the stuff he writes.
yeah.
He writes that fantastic trilogy of Chickamauga. Powell is kind of the definitely one of the go-to guys, no
Oh,
question
for
about it.
Western theater. Yeah, he's
Um,
kind of like the Western theater doesn't really, Gettysburg has so many like fawns and all that, and that's kind of like Dave Powell is kind of that voice for the Western theater, and he's got the 3 volume, the trilogy about
you know who's
Chickamauga.
really good about the Western theater, who he hasn't really written a book about this shit, is our friend Ed Lowe.
Yes, his book
I
about
wouldn't
Longstreet is so good.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him do one on the Atlanta campaign, because again, Atlanta campaign's great because you got all those battles running right on the modern highway now. And you can kind of go all the way back to Ringgold if you really want to think about it, if you want to go that far back.
Yeah,
But you talk about the intrigue of the cat and mouse game that took place between Johnston and Sherman. And even though with Sherman, 110,000 men going against 60 something thousand Confederates, he wouldn't fight them frontally, right? He would always just get around him. His goal was not to defeat Johnson. His goal was to take the city of Atlanta.
yeah,
Versus some of these other ones who, or Grant's goal was not Richmond, it was Lee. So you
yeah,
can see the different parallel, how all these things go. But yeah, it's a fascinating study because you can see how fighting for the most part in the woods on enemy territory, not really knowing exactly what to expect. I don't think anybody except Sherman could have pulled that off because of how well he was
Oh, I
able to
agree.
deal with the terrain. I think when we talk about Sherman a lot about not being able to execute battles and Chickasaw and Missionary Ridge,
Oh, Atlanta's a
right?
brilliant
But
campaign.
this one, like Rosecrans and Tullahoma, like Grant with Overland, this is one of the campaign. The Atlanta campaign is one of the big must-haves in the American Civil
Yeah.
War, and I don't, nothing against your boy Howard, he couldn't have done it, right?
No, I
So
completely agree.
I mean,
I think even Howard would admit Howard could not have done
no,
it.
Sherman was the guy to do it because he
Yep,
was the one who knew exactly how to maneuver. And he also knew Joseph E. Johnson. He knew
exactly.
how to deal with them. And that's what's great about this is you know these guys, so you don't know them personally, but you can kind of become a Monday morning quarterback psychiatrist and
Yeah,
get in their head a little bit and kind of see what makes the sparks go and see what's about. That's why it's so silly when you rip on I don't mean you, I mean people rip on generals. Howard's stupid. Ewell is dumb for not taking that hill.
yeah,
These guys all have really good things about all of them,
yeah,
but the good generals know how to exploit the weaknesses of their opponents,
yes,
right? And so you could be fantastic at defense, but you can't do offense. So
yeah,
if you're going against a guy like that, you know how to beat him, and that's what got Johnson, buried in Atlanta
yeah. Yep.
was he
Bjorn. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say what Johnson did was kind of a big infantry version of what Buford did at Gettysburg on a
Yep.
bigger scale. Just fight, fall back, and slow them down.
Yeah.
Try to. Where he screwed up though was he never got around the other side to destroy that train line, cut the
Yeah.
supplies out, and why Johnson never attacked. Because he could have used Wheeler to go around.
Yeah.
He could have gone 10 miles behind him and destroyed the railroad track and set up a garrison up there and just deny their supplies. He never did it. He never did it. He just took him like a champ and just whatever.
Yep. Bjorn mentions today that he's going to be interviewing David Powell at 2:30 Central, so 3:30 Eastern time about the first volume. I'm guessing that will be live streamed, but I did ask Bjorn in the chat if it's going to be live streamed. But if any of y'all want to check that out, depending on what we're doing, we'll try and be on. We'll definitely share it. The lives and just the interviews that Bjorn does at Abraham Lincoln Bookshop are always great. So great to get to listen to the author talk about stuff. Really enjoy watching those. So yeah, that's Abraham Lincoln Bookshop is
No, and
on their Facebook
he's got
page.
he's got a good personality too. So it's not like it's you're watching C-SPAN, watching these people bore you to
Bjorn's
death.
great. I love watching the interviews. They're so good.
So you can definitely have a lot of fun, with that. But again, he gets A-listers on. Silver A-listers
Yeah.
are pretty cool to get.
Yeah, well, we watched his interview with Tim Smith, Western Theater. We watched one he did with Liz Barron, which was really good, and we had her on. And then now he's having Dave Powell on. Like it's like really, really great guests come on and talk about their books on there. And then sometimes he just comes on as Abraham Lincoln, to show some of the stuff that they've recently got in at Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. And it's not just, if you're in Chicago, go see it, because it's not just books. It's like a treasure trove of Civil War artifacts.
Yep, no, it certainly is.
Like
I've been there for
stuff.
Frank's been there. You haven't been there yet.
Yep, I have not been there.
You have to live vicariously through me that day.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Bjorn said thanks for the shout out. Oh, you're welcome. You're a great sponsor for this podcast. And
no, we appreciate it. If you, like we said, we're doing a book club here soon. I mean, a trivia thing, and any books that anybody's ever won, all come from Bjorn. So we appreciate that. So good ones too.
James asked, would Forrest have been a better leader of Johnston's cavalry?
No, I don't know. I mean, he had a good one at Wheeler. I mean, it wasn't like he had some slouch either. I mean, they're different type of guys. Forrest was more of a raider. I don't think there's that much of a difference between Forrest. Forrest has more of a much negative connotation because of Fort Pillow and things like that. But Wheeler was a tough prick, though.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to have a guy like that, a hard fighting, aggressive guy, go for Joseph Wheeler. I don't think it would have been that much of a difference. Joseph Wheeler would later fight in the Spanish-American War, is why he gets to be buried in Arlington. So you can go Confederate cavalry officers buried in Arlington because of that. But no, that's a good question though. But I think I don't think they would have picked up anything extra because Wheeler, according to his report anyway, was begging Johnston to let him attack the supply line.
Yeah. And
basically Johnston's like, no, I can't spare you. If you get your ass kicked, I have no cavalry anymore. We're done here. So that's why he asked Davis to send troops down from Alabama to go ahead and do it for him. And of course he says no, but those guys aren't too different though. I mean, personality wise, aggressive wise. So you're trading one for the other, but
he's only in his mid-20s.
And these guys are young.
1836.
I mean, Hood's only 33 when this is going on.
Yeah, Howard's crazy. Howard's 34. Like they're all so just young. Like at Gettysburg, I think Howard was the youngest of the Corps commanders.
Yeah.
I think he's younger than Hancock as well. Yeah, I'm just looking at Wheeler. He's quite the he looks kind of like in a way reminds me, they don't look alike, but he's like Carl Schurz in the sense that he looks like he could really mess you up. And if he can't, then he knows someone who would.
I mean, think about it. You had those escaped slaves at Ebenezer drown because they didn't want to be caught by Joseph Wheeler. He was the one who was coming up their Savannah. It was Wheeler.
Yeah.
He was a tough prick. If you're a Confederate and if you're a general and you have cavalry, Wheeler's the type of guy you want because he's a ruthless dude. It's no question. He's all like John Hunt Morgan, who beats you for sport, but he'll just slap you on the ass and let you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Mosby did that too, right?
Mosby was like that too. But Wheeler and Forrest were tough pricks. I mean, they were a different breed than these other guys. So you're trading one for the other,
Yeah. Caleb mentions that Forrest didn't like Johnston's fighting style. And plus that thing happened after Chickamauga where Bragg took part of Forrest's cavalry because to Wheeler, and then Forrest is like, I am done fighting for you.
Well, Forrest liked being aggressive. Speaking of that, who went to West Point in the same class as Hood was Suey Smith. William Suey was part of that class too.
Oh, Shaggy.
Exactly. So he was a Union Cavalier guy who was scared shitless of Forrest.
Yeah.
Forrest was aggressive. He would attack you. He fought like the old Indian wars. Just one full speed at you. And Wheeler was kind of that same cloth. But of course, Forrest is not going to want to fight with Davis with Johnston because Johnston's passive.
Yeah.
He wants to fight with a Stonewall. He wants to fight with a guy like that.
Yeah.
Who's going to let him go out and do his cavalry things and his Beetlejuice things, we like to say.
His Beetlejuice things.
Elsie
Elsie says, I love studying Joe Wheeler despite Gary Busey's portrayal of him in Rough Riders.
Gary Busey's great though.
Really?
It was fantastic in Rookie of the Year.
I'm trying to remember him in the Rookie of the Year. It's been so long since
He played Stedman. He played Stedman. Stedman, you stink. Yeah.
Now I have to look him up.
You have so much to learn.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So much to learn.
But yeah, we have to, by the way, it's almost 11:30, which unfortunately we have plans at noon. So we have to jump off here in a few minutes.
Yeah, we got to jump a few minutes early today. We got big plans.
Yeah.
Big things afoot at the Circle K for us today.
Yeah.
But I think, hopefully people listen to the episode because I think if you really study the Atlanta campaign, and you really want to understand kind of the beginning of the end, like where the iceberg hits the ship with
Yeah,
Atlanta, it's
this is
this
it.
battle. This
Yeah.
is it. Because
Well, that,
it doesn't end it immediately. It still goes on for a month and a half. But
yeah,
this is where it really takes where they take their mortal blow, because you
yeah,
finally have an aggressive guy. You're finally going to seize the initiative. You're going to be the hammer, not the nail for a
yeah,
change. And then you still fail.
yeah,
And now you're going to fall back. You double down on the fail at Ezra. You
yeah,
triple down on the fail at Decatur. And then you're completely screwed. You got to
yeah,
get out of the city before it falls September 2nd. And then you end up having to go chase Schofield up towards Nashville.
yeah,
So everything kind of begins with Peachtree when you're looking at the beginning of the end of Atlanta. And
yeah.
that's really, and there's very few battles you can point to that this is the moment. This is it, but this is it. This is absolutely it.
Yeah, and that's when I was reading it, like reading about it again, and I've read, books about it before, and then read another one for this, read one of the ones I've read before for this one. Really kind of just really hit me this time, like, wow, this is a really understudied battle that is so important in securing Atlanta. But one of the reasons for that is Sherman crossing the Chattahoochee is so important, because once he does that, it's like there's no going back for him at all. But also the command change is really
I mean, you think
important
about it,
too.
as much as the March to the Sea gets all the credit and the Fall of Atlantic gets all the credit, basically getting around that incredible line
Yeah,
without really even a shot being fired and getting across the Chattahoochee. And they spent months defending that, building that, getting ready
yeah,
for that. Um, and they had, and the thing about it though is when they built, they had these things they're called Shupadates.
yeah.
That's what they called them, and it was kind of like a pointed fort that went out.
Mhm.
So it was about 16 feet tall, had abatis around it, gun placements. But again, you had to maintain these. I mean, there are stories where the soldiers got bored. They were pulling down the Shupadates themselves for
Yeah,
firewood. The generals had to tell them to stop doing that. You know,
yeah,
and they're like, oh, they're not going to attack. They're not going to attack. Um, but you can go visit and you still see some of those breastworks. But that was a gigantic line of defense that Johnson kind of put everything on. But the
yeah,
problem is he had his back to the river, the Chattahoochee.
yeah,
He should have put it on the other side of the river,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
To give himself
yeah,
basically a big moat they'd have to get to.
yeah,
But I always found it fascinating that he put his headquarters on the other side of the river. He
yeah.
wasn't going to be so
Yeah,
even
he was
he
like,
knew.
he knew it was going to fall eventually.
Yeah.
Bjorn mentions that the battle books coming out now are some of the first studies on Atlanta campaign battles, so that's pretty cool. The one story you did not tell was Sherman crossing the Chattahoochee in our episode.
Oh, that's right. But there's that story. I forget where the hell I read that.
So
I
we'll
didn't
end on a
actually.
funny note here.
Well, it was the soldiers talking about when Sherman crossed the Chattahoochee, he stripped totally naked in front of them and just swam across to us. They're stunned men. I don't know why they would have stunned them, but
Like,
a lot of them did it. But they
well, you
talked about
probably don't expect your commanding general to take all his clothes
but
off and just be like, "Woo, here we go."
just jump in the river and just go across. So yeah, but it's kind of a funny story. I'm not sure what that was all about. I want to keep his pants dry.
Probably. Well, didn't the other guys just take off like their outer clothes and swim
A
across?
lot a lot of people did strip naked down. They would hold their pants over their heads.
Yeah.
A lot of them talk about cross the Potomac in the Gettysburg campaign, stripping down naked and doing that. Every so often you'll hear you read a diary and someone talks about it. Guy from Company East, stripped everything off naked down to his, down to where the good Lord, gave him. And then there's just little things. It's funny when people talk about it because somebody somewhere turned around and saw a naked Sherman jump in the water.
Yeah. Oh my God. Rob Delby said, thanks, guys. Always informative, entertaining. Have a great weekend. You too, Rob. And Andrea AQ says, try to say Chattahoochee 3 times fast from the mine. LOL.
Oh, it took me a while to figure out how to say that one.
Yeah, you struggled with that one.
Oh, that's tough. So what's coming up for us as we get ready to sign off here?
So we are, I think, going to be doing a roundtable on Tuesday night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tuesday night, we're going to do a roundtable. So this is kind of a late notice, but we decided today while sitting on having coffee this morning. We haven't done one in a while. We got a lot of stuff. We'll be very busy in these next couple of weeks. So we have to get it over with. So we're going to do this Tuesday. We'll send notes out. So if you want to be a part of it, we'll email you out and sign on. We'll send those. It's on Zoom. It's just like this, but everybody's on. It's just like a big get together. So hopefully you can join us. And then we have the Battle of Ream Station coming up, right? and then we're going to be doing Jonesboro after that.
Yes, we will be
Book
doing
club,
Jonesboro.
book club will be coming up. We're going to be doing planning some other events here soon.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff that's coming up, huh? But these next 4 weeks of our lives are going to be pretty freaking busy. So we're going to have to work around this stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
We'll
but we
get
want to
there.
get a roundtable done on Tuesday night. So yes, we know it's short notice, but so if you never attended before, it's just via Zoom, casual discussion. We don't really have a topic, just nerd about the Civil War for an hour and a half. And just I put the information in the comments there. So, and we'll post about it on our social medias as well. So just send us an email, civilwarbreakfastclub@gmail.com, and we will send you an invite for that in a few days.
Yeah, then the more the merrier. It's just to come on and hang out. There's like you just said, there's no real topic. We just
Everyone's
get together
welcome.
and just talk about it. It's a judgment-free note. You could be a Johnny Reb or you could be a Billy Yank. We don't judge you one way or the other. So we
Yeah.
hope you come on and we can talk about it from your perspective. So all right, so off we go, Mary. So once again, we say the pleasure is always yours. And so we will talk to you all soon. Have a great, safe weekend. It's Saturday. Someone said Sunday on this chat earlier. Today's
Really?
Saturday. Yeah, someone
It's
said
Saturday.
happy
Yeah.
Sunday. I'm like, it freaked me out for a second. I really saw the comments, like, it better not be Sunday.
Yeah, it was like, did we sleep for 24 hours?
Otherwise, I'm blacking out again, Mary. And that's not
Yeah.
usually me who does that.
No.
No. Anyway, all right, guys, have a